She never spoke. For 3 years, Thorne Harlow fixed targets on the military range, deliberately fading into the background while elite operators honed their skills. They barely noticed her until the day a SEAL's mockery pushed too far. When Lieutenant Breyer silently handed her his sniper rifle, no one expected what followed. The impossible shot she made didn't just hit the target 2,100 m away. It shattered everything they thought they knew about the quiet woman they had overlooked every day. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoyed this story and want more content like this, please consider subscribing. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful narratives. The morning light cuts across the Nevada desert like a blade, revealing the sprawling military training facility in harsh detail. Range 7 sits isolated from the main compound, a harsh stretch of earth where the elite come to prove themselves. As the sun crests the horizon, a weathered pickup truck rumbles to a stop at the guard gate. The engine sputters once before falling silent. Thorne Harlow exits the vehicle with practiced efficiency. 36 lean with calloused hands and a worn cap pulled low over watchful eyes. The guard barely acknowledges her with a cursory nod. After 3 years of the same routine, she's practically invisible here. Just another piece of the landscape. "Morning, Ms. Harlow," the guard says without looking up from his clipboard. Thorne responds with the slightest nod. Words are currency she rarely spends. She moves through her morning routine with mechanical precision, checking targeting systems, calibrating equipment, fixing alignment issues too subtle for others to notice. When she kneels to adjust a distant target mechanism, her hands work with unusual confidence, correcting an angle by exactly 1.3 degrees without measuring. A small detail, but one that could affect a shot's accuracy by millimeters at extreme distance. The early morning solitude is her favorite part of the job. No questions, no eyes watching, just the quiet desert and the work. Thorne runs her hand along a targeting rail, feeling for imperfections invisible to the eye. Her fingers catch a minuscule burr in the metal. She files it down with careful practice strokes. As Commander Riker approaches, clipboard in hand, Thorne immediately shifts her body language. Her shoulders hunch slightly, eyes cast downward, movements becoming deliberately less fluid. It's not fear, it's camouflage. "Systems check out," Riker asks, professional but distant. Thorne nods, gesturing to the completed checklist on her workbench. "Good. We've got SEAL Team 8 qualifying today. High priority." She acknowledges with another nod, then recedes into the background as operators begin to arrive. They flow around her like water around a stone, their conversations and laughter creating a bubble of activity that never quite includes her. She becomes part of the infrastructure, no more noticeable than the targets themselves. Only Lieutenant Breyer seems to notice her at all, his eyes tracking her movements with quiet curiosity as she makes minute adjustments to equipment. When a helicopter approaches from the east, Thorne's body tenses imperceptibly, a reaction so subtle only someone watching closely would notice. Breyer notes the reaction, filing it away with other observations about the range's most enigmatic employee. By midday, the range hums with activity. Shooters line up at various distances, their rifles cracking in controlled sequences. Thorne moves between stations, invisible to all but the equipment itself. She notices a slight drift on one of the targets and quickly calculates the adjustment needed. 2 MOA drift on target 6, she writes on a slip of paper, placing it on Commander Riker's station before disappearing again. When the operators break for lunch, congregating in the shade of the equipment shed, Thorne works alone on a distant target. Through the shimmer of heat rising from the baked earth, she expertly diagnoses and repairs an issue that would have thrown off accuracy calculations for the afternoon session. No one notices. No one thanks her. And judging by the way her shoulders relax once she's alone, that's exactly how Thorne Harlow wants it. A week passes in much the same way. Thorne arrives before sunrise, maintains the range with meticulous care, and leaves after everyone else. She exists in the periphery of the operator's awareness, a ghost who keeps their world functioning without interrupting it. Then comes the day when everything changes. "This is nonsense," Warrant Officer Cade Vosek mutters, adjusting the scope on his rifle for the third time. Something's wrong with this equipment. The atmosphere on Range 7 crackles with tension. A joint training operation has brought fresh SEAL candidates alongside veteran operators, and everyone feels the pressure to perform under the watchful eye of a visiting high-ranking officer. Vase, 39, with the confidence of someone used to being the best, fails another difficult long-range shot. His frustration radiates outward, infecting the mood of those around him. "You're compensating for the wrong win value," Lieutenant Breyer observes quietly from nearby. "I am not," Vask snaps. "It's the equipment." As if summoned by the accusation, Thorn appears with her toolbox. She moves toward the targeting system, keeping her eyes fixed on the ground, her cap pulled low as always. Her movements are economical, practiced, designed not to draw attention. Vask watches her approach with growing irritation. His earlier failures finding a convenient target. Maybe if Target Girl wasn't too busy daydreaming, the equipment would work right. A few of the younger operators laugh uncomfortably. Thorn keeps her head down, continuing toward her destination as if she hasn't heard. She kneels by the targeting computer, fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Base calls. "What's wrong? You too good to respond, or just too stupid?" The laughter dies. Commander Riker looks up sharply from his clipboard, but doesn't intervene. The tension on the range shifts, operators exchanging glances, suddenly uncomfortable with the confrontation. Thorn remains silent, her hands steady despite the humiliation. She kneels by the targeting system, methodically checking components with practiced movements. Her face reveals nothing, a mask perfected over years of deliberate invisibility. "Unbelievable," Vask continues louder now. "This is why women don't belong on military bases. They can't even handle basic equipment maintenance." The tension shifts again. Something flickers across Thorn's face. A momentary crack in her carefully constructed facade. It's gone almost immediately, but Lieutenant Breyer catches it, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. For a split second, he glimpses something beneath the mask, something hard and dangerous and carefully contained. Thorn finishes her work on the targeting system, making a small adjustment that Vask had missed. Without acknowledging the continuing stream of comments, she gathers her tools and walks away, invisible once more. But something has changed. The careful balance of Range 7 has been disturbed. 2 days later, the situation escalates. The same joint training operation continues, now focused on extreme long-D distanciance shooting. The targets stand at 2,100 m, wavering slightly in the heat mirage rising from the desert floor. It's a challenging shot under ideal conditions. Today, with variable winds and the pressure of observation, it's proving nearly impossible. "Winds shifting southeast 10 knots, Commander Riker announces, watching through high-powered binoculars. The line of shooters adjust their calculations. Rifles crack in sequence. Results are mixed, but no one has managed a perfect center hit yet." Vase, still smarting from his earlier failures, grows increasingly agitated with each attempt. Thorn works quietly at the far end of the range, repairing a mechanical target that had jammed during the morning session. She's deliberately positioned herself away from the main firing line, away from Vask and his cutting comments. Through her protective earwear, the crack of rifles sounds distant, almost dreamy. When she finishes her repairs and begins walking back toward the main station, Vask's voice carries across the range. "Hell, even the Target Girl could hit better than some of you trainees today." Mocking laughter follows. Thorn keeps her eyes on the ground, her path calculated to skirt the edge of the gathering. But as she passes, something unexpected happens. Lieutenant Breyer steps away from the group and walks directly toward her. His movement is deliberate, unhurried. The laughter dies as operators turn to watch. Without a word, Breyer extends his custom Macmillan TAC .338 sniper rifle toward Thorn. For a moment, absolute stillness descends on Range 7. Thorn stares at the weapon, something profound and painful crossing her face. "Decision time. What are you doing, Breyer?" Base asks, but there's uncertainty in his voice now. Thorn doesn't move, doesn't breathe. Her eyes remain fixed on the rifle, a complexity of emotions playing across features usually kept carefully neutral. For the first time since she arrived at Range 7 3 years ago, people are actually looking at her, seeing her, and it clearly makes her deeply uncomfortable. Then, with a slow exhale, she accepts the rifle. The transformation is immediate, but subtle. Her posture shifts almost imperceptibly. Her shoulders square, her spine straightens, her chin lifts just enough to change the entire impression she gives. Her hands cradle the weapon with unmistakable familiarity, checking the chamber and adjusting the stock with practiced efficiency. Her eyes take on a focused intensity previously hidden beneath the shadow of her cap. Without a word, she moves to the firing position. The operators watch in silence as she lies prone, adjusting her position with textbook precision. She performs a perfect pre-shot routine, breathing regulated, calculations made without external tools. There's no hesitation, no uncertainty. Every movement speaks of thousands of hours behind a rifle. She fires. The target 2,100 m out registers a perfect center hit. The red flag waves once, confirming what seems impossible. Without celebration, without so much as a change of expression, she chambers another round and fires again. Another perfect hit. Complete silence dominates the range. Commander Riker steps forward, studying her with new eyes. Recognition dawns on his face as pieces fall into place. "You're Harlow," he says quietly. "Thorn Harlow." The name clearly means something significant to the senior operators. Younger SEALs look confused, exchanging glances, trying to understand the sudden shift in atmosphere. Breyer turns to them. 5 consecutive confirmed kills at 2,300 m in the Corinal Valley. Under heavy fire. Mission classified. Record never broken. Fosk's face drains of color as he realizes who he's been mocking for days. Thorn stands, hands the rifle back to Breyer with a simple nod of thanks, and begins walking toward her truck. The stunned silence follows her across the range. No one moves to stop her, but every eye tracks her progress, seeing her for perhaps the first time. As she reaches her truck, Lieutenant Breyer appears beside her. "Why?" he asks simply. Thorn meets his gaze directly for the first time. Her voice, when it finally comes, is rough from disuse, but clear and steady. "Some ghosts prefer to stay buried, Lieutenant." She climbs into her truck and drives away, leaving the range in silence behind her, but things have irreversibly changed. The invisible woman has been seen, and neither she nor those who saw her will ever be quite the same again. The morning after Thorn Harlow revealed her extraordinary marksmanship skills, Range 7 buzzed with speculation. Operators who had never given her a second glance now watched her every move, whispering theories about her past. The invisible woman had become the center of attention, a role she clearly despised. Thorn arrived earlier than usual, hoping to complete her morning maintenance before anyone else appeared. But Commander Riker's vehicle was already parked outside the equipment shed, breaking her carefully established routine. "Harlow," he said as she approached, his voice neutral, but his eyes appraising. "Got a minute?" She nodded once, following him inside. The small office was sparse, utilitarian, much like everything else at Range 7. "I made some calls after yesterday," Riker said, watching her carefully. "Confirmed what I suspected. You were Force Recon before transitioning to a classified JC unit. Distinguished service in Afghanistan. Multiple commendations." Thorn's expression remained impassive, giving away nothing. Then something happened in the Coringal Valley. Operation Broken Arrow. Riker leaned forward. "The details are still classified above my pay grade, but the aftermath is clear enough. You were honorably discharged. Psychological assessment recommended civilian transition. Is there a question in there, sir?" Thorn asked, her voice rough from disuse. "Why are you here, Harlow? With your skills, you could be doing a lot more than fixing targets." She met his gaze steadily. "I like fixing things, sir. It's simple, straightforward. Unlike taking lives," her expression flickered momentarily. "Yes, sir. Unlike that." Riker nodded slowly, recognizing boundaries. "The qualification exercises continue today. Your presence would be valuable. I have maintenance schedules to keep. Those can wait." It wasn't quite an order, but close enough. "Your expertise could benefit these operators. Many of them have never worked with someone of your caliber." Thorn hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the attention being redirected her way. Finally, she gave a single reluctant nod. 0900 hours. Main firing line. Outside, the Nevada sun climbed higher, promising another scorching day. Thorn worked methodically through her morning checklist, trying to ignore the curious glances from arriving personnel. By 0900, a sizable group had assembled at the main firing line, including several faces she didn't recognize. Senior officers, including one with general stars, stood in a small cluster near Commander Riker. Vase arrived last, his expression tight and controlled. He gave Thorn a wide berth, the memory of yesterday's humiliation still fresh. "Gentlemen," Commander Riker began. "Today, we're focusing on extreme long-distance engagement. Before we begin, I want to introduce a special consultant who will be observing and providing feedback. Ms. Thorn Harlow." All eyes turned to her. Thorn stood stiffly, uncomfortable under their scrutiny. The weight of their expectations pressed against her carefully constructed barriers. "Ms. Harlow has extensive experience with long-distance target acquisition and engagement," Riker continued, deliberately vague about her background. "She'll be evaluating technique and offering suggestions for improvement." The training session began with standard qualification routines. Thorn watched silently as each operator took their position, made their calculations, and engaged targets at progressively greater distances. She noticed patterns, tendencies, strengths, and weaknesses in each shooter, but kept her observations to herself unless directly asked by Riker. Lieutenant Breyer performed admirably, consistently placing shots within acceptable margins. When he finished his qualification round, he approached Thorn. "Any observations?" he asked quietly. She studied him for a moment before responding. "You're anticipating the recoil tensing just before you pull the trigger. It's throwing your shots too in right at maximum distance." Breyer considered this, then nodded. "Been trying to correct that for months. No one else noticed." "Most wouldn't," she said simply. As the day progressed, Thorn gradually engaged more, offering precise technical feedback that demonstrated her deep understanding of ballistics and marksmanship. The operators, initially skeptical, began to seek her input, recognizing expertise when they encountered it. All except Vasek, who maintained his distance, his pride still wounded. During a brief break, the general approached Thorn. His name tape read Harrison, and his bearing suggested decades of command experience. "Remarkable shooting yesterday, Miss Harlow," he said conversationally. "Lieutenant Breyer filled me in. 2 consecutive hits at 2,100 me is impressive under any circumstances." "Thank you, sir," she responded neutrally. "Reminds me of reports I read about a mission in the Kringle. 5 confirmed kills at 2,300 meters under heavy fire. The shooter's identity was classified." His eyes held hers until now. Thorn tensed visibly. "That information remains classified, sir." "Indeed, it does. But the skills that made that mission possible are evident." Harrison lowered his voice. "Those skills could still serve a purpose, Harlow. The right purpose." Before she could respond, the general was called away. Thorn remained where she stood. Memories she had spent 3 years burying threatening to resurface. The weight of what she had done, what she had been, pressed against her chest like a physical presence. The afternoon session focused on moving targets at extreme distances, a particularly challenging aspect of sniper training. As operators struggled with the combination of variables, frustration mounted. Vasek, determined to redeem himself, repeatedly attempted shots beyond his demonstrated capacity, failing each time. "This is ridiculous," he muttered after another miss. "The wind calculations must be off." Thorn, standing nearby, spoke without thinking. "It's not the wind. Your breathing is inconsistent." Vask turned sharply. "I didn't ask for your opinion." "No, but you need it." The words came more easily now. Muscle memory of a different kind activating. "You're rushing the shot, trying to prove something. The target doesn't care about your ego." Their exchange drew attention. Operators paused their own practice, sensing confrontation. "You think you're better than everyone here because you got lucky yesterday," Vask said, voice low and dangerous. "1 shot doesn't make you an expert." 2 shots, Lieutenant Breyer corrected from nearby. "Perfect center mass 2,100 m, Vosk ignored him. "If you're so good, why don't you demonstrate for us again? Show us all how it's done." Thorn regarded him coolly. "I'm not here to compete." "No, you're here to hide." Vask pressed, sensing vulnerability. 3 years fixing targets because you're afraid to pull the trigger again. What happened, Harlow? What are you running from? The words struck with precision, finding gaps in her carefully constructed armor. Around them, operators shifted uncomfortably, sensing they were witnessing something private, something raw. "That's enough, warrant officer." Commander Riker intervened, but the damage was done. Thorn's expression had closed completely, shutting down all the progress of the day. Without a word, she turned and walked away, heading toward the distant end of the range, where targets needed repair. Lieutenant Breyer found her there an hour later, methodically replacing damaged target components. He didn't speak immediately, just began helping with the repairs, respecting her silence. Finally, he said, Vask was out of line. He wasn't wrong, Thorne replied after a long moment. About you hiding? She nodded once. We all carry weight from what we've done, Breyer said carefully. Especially in our line of work. The shots we take, the decisions we make, they stay with us. Some more than others. The Kringle. Thorne's hands stilled momentarily. Classified. The outcome isn't. The mission succeeded because of your shots. Lives were saved. And taken, she said softly. Breyer was quiet for a moment. That's the job. The burden we accept. I couldn't accept it anymore. Thorne looked up, meeting his eyes directly. 5 shots, 5 confirmed kills. All children. Breyer's expression remained neutral, but his eyes registered shock. Children. Child soldiers. 14, 15 years old. Armed and dangerous. Yes. About to ambush a Marine platoon. Yes. Her voice remained steady, but her hands trembled slightly. All true. All justifiable. All children. Understanding dawned on Breyer's face. So you left, honorably discharged. Psychological evaluation suggested I wasn't fit for continued service. A ghost of a bitter smile crossed her face. They were right. And you came here where I could fix targets instead of taking them out. Where no one would know what I had done. Where I could disappear. Until yesterday. Thorne nodded once. Until yesterday. They worked in silence for several minutes, the confession hanging between them, neither adding nor diminishing the weight she carried. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting long shadows across Range 7, Breyer spoke again. You know, those Marines went home to their families because of what you did. I know, she said quietly. It doesn't make it easier. It's not supposed to be easy. If it were easy, we wouldn't be the right people for the job. He regarded her thoughtfully. The weight you carry, the fact that it still weighs on you after all this time, proves you were exactly the right person. Thorne didn't respond, but something in her expression shifted slightly. A minuscule crack in the armor she had built around herself. As they finished repairs and began walking back toward the main facility, a commotion drew their attention. One of the younger operators was engaged in a heated argument with Vasak near the equipment shed. Words were exchanged, tensions escalating rapidly. This could get ugly, Breyer muttered, quickening his pace. As they approached, they heard Vask's dismissive tone. You couldn't hit that target in your dreams, rookie. That's a 20,500 me shot, with variable wind conditions. I'm telling you I can make it, the younger operator insisted. I've trained for this. Training isn't doing, Vask retorted. Put your money where your mouth is. The younger man grabbed his rifle, clearly intending to prove himself. Thorne watched with growing concern, recognizing the dangerous combination of pride, inexperience, and peer pressure. He's not ready for that shot, she said quietly to Breyer. His fundamentals are solid, but his wind reading is inconsistent. At that distance, with these conditions, he'll miss. And Vask will never let him forget it, Breyer agreed. The situation was rapidly developing into something that would damage unit cohesion and potentially a promising young operator's confidence. Thorne hesitated, torn between her desire to remain invisible and the clear need for intervention. Decision time again. With a deep breath, she stepped forward. Before you take that shot, there's a technique you should know. All eyes turned to her, including Vasak's, narrowed with suspicion. For wind adjustment at extreme distances, she continued, her voice gaining strength. There's a calculation method they don't teach in standard training. The younger operator looked at her uncertainly, then at his rifle. Will it help with this shot? It might, she said honestly. But more importantly, it will help with every shot after this one. For the first time in 3 years, Thorne Harlow deliberately stepped into the light, sharing knowledge she had kept buried with her past. As she explained the complex calculations for extreme long-D distanciance shooting, operators gathered around, including some who had dismissed her just days ago. Even Vasak listened, his professional curiosity eventually overcoming his wounded pride. In that moment, something shifted within Thorne. The burden she carried didn't disappear. But perhaps, just perhaps, there was a way to balance it with something positive, something that might save lives rather than take them. The days that followed brought subtle, but significant changes to Range 7. Thorne Harlow still arrived before dawn and still maintained the targets with meticulous care, but she no longer disappeared into the background. When operators asked questions about long-distance shooting techniques, she answered them, her expertise flowing more freely with each passing day. Commander Riker observed these changes with quiet approval. The morning after Thorne had stepped forward to help the young operator, he approached her as she calibrated a target system. "I spoke with General Harrison," he said without preamble. "He's impressed with what he saw yesterday." Thorne continued her work, adjusting a sensor with practiced precision. "I just showed them a calculation method. You did more than that. You connected with them, used your experience to help someone else improve." Riker leaned against the equipment table. "Harrison wants to formalize your role here, official marksmanship consultant in addition to your regular duties, if you're interested." Her hands paused briefly. "I'm not sure I am." "Think about it," Riker said. "Your choice. No pressure." As he walked away, Thorne realized how different this felt from the military orders that had defined much of her life. A choice freely offered, the weight of expectations without the burden of command. It was unfamiliar territory. Later that morning, Lieutenant Breyer found her replacing a damaged target face. "Heard about Riker's offer," he said, helping her secure the new target. "Thoughts?" "Still processing," she admitted. "Not sure I'm ready to be that visible again." Breyer nodded, understanding. "For what it's worth, the team's talking about what you showed them yesterday." Even Vasek admitted the calculation method was something he'd never seen before. "High praise," she said dryly. "From him?" "Absolutely." Breyer handed her a screwdriver. "You know, there's a middle ground between completely invisible and standing in the spotlight. You could find that balance here." Thorne considered his words as they finished the repair in companionable silence. The idea of a middle ground was appealing, a way to use her skills without resuming the role that had cost her so much. At midday, she was surprised to see Vasek approaching her workstation. His expression was guarded but not hostile. "Harlow," he said stiffly. "Got a minute?" She nodded, wiping her hands on a rag. "That calculation method you showed yesterday, it's solid. Improved my grouping by 30% at maximum range." The word seemed difficult for him. "Where did you learn it?" "Developed it myself," she said. "During deployment, standard calculations didn't account for all variables at extreme distances." Vask's eyebrows rose slightly. "You developed it. When lives depend on shot placement, you get creative." He nodded slowly, professional respect gradually overcoming personal pride. "I've got a training session this afternoon. Advanced snipers practicing hostage scenario shots. If you're not busy with targets, maybe you could observe. Give some pointers." The invitation was clearly difficult for him. A concession from a man unaccustomed to admitting others might know more. Thorne recognized it for the olive branch it was. "I'll be there," she said simply. Something shifted between them. Not friendship, but professional acknowledgement. A first step toward mutual respect. The afternoon session proved enlightening for everyone involved. Thorne observed quietly at first, but gradually offered specific technical advice that improved each shooter's performance. Her suggestions were precise, practical, and immediately applicable, clearly born from hard-won experience. Vask, to his credit, implemented her recommendations without resistance, his shots becoming noticeably more consistent. When the session ended, he approached her again. "Your knowledge is wasted fixing targets," he said bluntly. "You should be teaching these techniques formally." "Maybe," she allowed, still thinking about it. As the days passed, Thorne found herself increasingly engaged with the operators, sharing her expertise in small, manageable doses that felt comfortable. She still maintained her distance emotionally, still kept her past largely to herself, but the wall she had built was developing doorways, controlled points of connection. A week after her impromptu demonstration, General Harrison returned to Range 7. He watched Thorne working with a group of snipers, making minor adjustments to their positions that significantly improved their accuracy. "She's a natural instructor," Harrison commented to Riker. "Firm, but not overbearing, technical, but practical." "Yes, sir," Riker agreed. "Different person from who she was 2 weeks ago." "Not different," Harrison corrected. "Just more complete. She's integrating parts of herself she'd locked away." After the training session concluded, Harrison approached Thorne directly. "Walk with me, Harlow." They moved away from the main firing line toward the distant targets shimmering in the afternoon heat. "I've reviewed your file," Harrison began. "The complete file, including the classified sections regarding Operation Broken Arrow." Thorne tensed visibly. but continued walking. 5 shots. 5 confirmed neutralizations of armed hostiles preparing to ambush a Marine platoon. Harrison continued. 23 American lives saved by your actions. They were children, Thorne said quietly. They were armed combatants, Harris countered. Deliberately positioned by Taliban commanders who knew we'd hesitate, who knew the psychological impact it would have on whoever took those shots. Does knowing that make it easier, sir? No, it shouldn't be easy, but it should be contextualized. Harrison stopped walking, turning to face her directly. The fact that it still weighs on you speaks to your character, Harlow. Not everyone carries that weight. Some compartmentalize too effectively, become detached. That's when mistakes happen. Thorne met his gaze steadily. With respect, sir, I couldn't compartmentalize enough. That's why I left. You left because you needed distance. Time to process. That's different from running away. Harrison gestured toward the operators still visible in the distance. What you're doing here, sharing your knowledge. That's how we honor difficult choices, by ensuring others have the skills to make those choices correctly when their time comes. His words struck something deep within her, a perspective she hadn't fully considered. Every technique she shared, every adjustment she suggested potentially meant the difference between a clean shot and a miss, between lives saved and lives lost unnecessarily. Consider Riker's offer, Harrison said. Not because we need you, though we do, but because you need this, a way to transform what haunts you into something constructive. As Harrison walked away, Thorne remained standing among the distant targets, considering his words. The Nevada sun beat down, harsh and clarifying as she weighed choices that suddenly seemed less binary than before. That evening, as most personnel departed Range 7, Thorne found herself lingering, moving through the equipment shed with unhurried steps. The familiar tools and components had been her refuge for 3 years. A world simple and straightforward, free from the complexities of her previous life. Thinking deep thoughts, she turned to find Lieutenant Breyer leaning against the door frame. Just considering options, she replied, and still weighing them. Breyer nodded, understanding her deliberation. I'm heading to the auxiliary range, some practice before the light goes. Care to join? The invitation was casual, without pressure, and perhaps that's why Thorne found herself accepting. They walked in comfortable silence to the smaller range set away from the main facility. Breyer set up a series of targets at varying distances, then offered her his rifle. Ladies first. Thorne accepted the weapon, the familiar weight settling against her shoulder as she took position. This time there was no audience, no point to prove, just the pure mechanics of marksmanship. She breathed, calculated, squeezed the trigger. The shot found center mass on the distant target. Still got it, Breyer commented, taking his turn. They alternated shots as the sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the range. The simplicity of the activity, the focus required, created a space where conversation could emerge naturally without pressure. When did you know you wanted to be a sniper? Breyer asked between shots. Thorne considered the question. Qualifying day at Scout Sniper School. First time everything clicked. All the elements coming together perfectly. You family tradition. Father was Force Recon. Grandfather was a Marine Scout sniper in Vietnam. Breyer adjusted his scope slightly. Neither pushed me toward it, but the stories they told, the precision, the discipline, it called to me. As darkness approached, they packed up the equipment, the shared activity having created a comfortable space between them. Same time tomorrow, Breyer asked casually. Thorne nodded, surprised by how much she wanted to say yes. I'll be here. The following morning, Thorne arrived at Range 7 with a decision made. She found Commander Riker in his office reviewing qualification scores. Sir, she said from the doorway about the consultant position. Riker looked up expectantly. I'll do it, she said, with conditions. Name them. I maintain my regular duties. The consulting is additional, not replacement, and I want to focus on technique and calculation, not combat psychology or tactical applications. Riker nodded slowly. Seems reasonable. Anything else? Thorne hesitated. I'd like to develop a comprehensive long-distance shooting curriculum. Something that codifies the techniques I've developed, makes them standard. A smile crossed Riker's face. Consider it approved. When can you start? I already have, she replied. Over the next few weeks, a new rhythm established itself at Range 7. Thorne continued maintaining targets and equipment with her usual precision, but now also conducted focused training sessions for advanced snipers. Her curriculum quickly gained a reputation, drawing operators from other units seeking to learn her methods. Vask, somewhat to everyone's surprise, became one of her strongest advocates, implementing her techniques with his own trainees and sending them to her for specialized instruction. Their professional relationship evolved into something resembling mutual respect, the earlier confrontation fading into background context. 1 month after her pivotal shot, Thorne found herself observing a qualification session for new sniper candidates. One young operator struggled with a particularly difficult wind calculation, his frustration mounting with each missed shot. "May I?" she asked, approaching his position. The young man nodded eagerly, clearly aware of her reputation. Thorne knelt beside him, making small adjustments to his position. "You're calculating wind at your position, but not accounting for changes downrange. At this distance, you need to factor the terrain features affecting wind channels." She guided him through her calculation method, explaining each variable and its impact. His next shot struck significantly closer to center mass. "Better," she acknowledged again. As she continued working with the young operator, she became aware of General Harrison observing from a distance, a satisfied expression on his face. When the session concluded, he approached her. "You found your place, Harlow," he said simply. "Part of it, sir," she corrected. "I'm still finding the balance. Aren't we all?" Harrison smiled slightly. "The burden doesn't disappear, but it gets lighter when shared properly, when transformed into something that helps others." Thorne nodded, understanding the truth in his words. The weight of the Kringle Valley would always be with her, but now it was counterbalanced by something constructive, a way to ensure others had the skills to make the right decisions in impossible moments. As the sun set on Range 7, casting long shadows across the desert, Thorne walked among the distant targets she had maintained for 3 years. Once they had been her refuge, a way to hide from who she had been and what she had done. Now they represented something different, a bridge between her past and her future. Lieutenant Breyer joined her carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Penny, for your thoughts." "Just appreciating the view," she said, accepting the offered cup. "It looks different somehow." "Same view," he noted. "Different perspective," she nodded, sipping the coffee. "I spent 3 years trying to make myself invisible here. And now I'm learning to be visible again on my own terms." The next morning, Thor Harlow arrived at Range 7 before dawn, as she always had. She checked in with the gate guard, who greeted her by name. She performed her equipment maintenance with the same meticulous care. When operators arrived for the day's training, she acknowledged them with quiet confidence. Some things hadn't changed. She still preferred action to words, still valued precision above all else, still carried the weight of her past decisions. But as she moved through the familiar landscape of Range 7, there was a fundamental difference. The woman who had once been a ghost, present but unseen, now cast a shadow of her.